Hi, I'm Maaike, and in this video I will tell you about loops in Java. So let's start with a very basic question. What are loops? Well, strictly speaking, loops are a control flow statement that specifies iteration. I can imagine that this sounds a bit vague, so let's say it simply, and that means that the code that's in the loop can be executed multiple times depending on the definition of the loop. In Java, there are different loops. There is a for loop. In a for loop, you specify to do something a certain amount of times. There's also a for each loop, also called an enhanced for loop. And in this loop, you do something for each element in a collection or an array. Then you also have the while loop. In the while loop, you do something while a certain condition is true. And then the last one is the do while loop. And the do while loop is for when you want to do something at least once and then repeat it as long as a certain condition is true. So let's have a look at these different loops in Intellij. Here you see a public class loops in which I made a public static void main, just for the sake of this video. A for loop is built up out of three pieces. So you start off with the word for, and then there's two round parentheses in which there are three parts. First you have some sort of counter that you start off with to specify. Then you have a certain condition, so say for when I is smaller than 10. And then you can say I++, meaning increase I by 1. Let's just do something very simple here. Let's just print I plus, just say iteration. So if I run this code, it will print 10 times the number plus iteration. It starts at 0 and it ends at 9. So let's first run it. You see that it starts at 0 and it ends at 9. What is actually happening is that every time the code is being executed, it is adding 1 to I, and then after that it's checking the condition. So the first time you enter the loop, it specifies the variable in the first part of the for loop. Then right after that, it will check whether the condition is met. If that's the case, it will execute the code. And after executing the code, it will do the last action specified in a third part, which is in this case adding 1 to I. Then again, it will check the condition. And if the condition is met, it will execute the code. After that, it will again add 1 to I, check the condition again, etc. And it goes on until the condition is no longer met. Then the program is done executing the loop and it continues on line 7. In our case, nothing happens after line 7, so the program just stops. So let's comment this out for now and let's have a little look at the enhanced for loop. The enhanced for loop is used for arrays or collections, as I already said. So let's just make a string array. Just put some values in here. Hi, hello, I. And in the enhanced for loop, we use a different notation. We say for again, but instead of specifying the 3 parts, we specify only 2 parts. So first we specify the variable that we want to use during the iteration, and we're saying it's part of strings. So actually we're saying for each string s in strings. And let's just make our lives easy and just print this. So this will print hi, hello, bye. The string array specified here has 3 elements, and we're actually saying that we want to iterate over all the elements in this array. And during each iteration, we will call the current element we're at s. So the first time it is going over the code s equals hi, the second time s equals hello, and the third time s equals bye. Let's have a look. So here we see the result. What is actually good to know is that beneath the surface, this is not very special. Because what we see here is the compiled code. You see we're in loops.class now, and this is what Java made out of our code. And we can see that this is actually secretly just a normal for loop with a bunch of automatic generated values. Well, don't worry too much if you don't understand it, but just know that the enhanced for loop is just being translated by Java to a normal for loop. But it is a nice notation and it makes this very readable for us. So let's comment this all out again and move on to the while loop. I already said that while is being executed while a certain condition is true. So let's make an integer for ourselves here and say int I equals 0 and say while I is smaller than, let's go for 15 this time, print I. Well, if I do this, I will end up in an infinite loop. Look, it will print 0 infinitely, well, or until my computer is done printing zeros. But this is because I remains 0 and 0 never becomes bigger than 15. So what we actually need to do is in this loop also specify something so that we are sure that at some point the condition is no longer met. So now we'll just increase I by 1 again, and we'll see that as soon as I becomes 15, the condition is no longer met because 15 is not smaller than 15. And we will be out of the loop. So let's do this again. There we go. It executes the code 15 times, starting at 0, ending at 14. So that's a while loop. A while loop is not executed if the condition is not met in the first place. So if I say I equals 0, do this while I is smaller than 0, you can see that nothing is actually happening here because 0 is not smaller than 0. Well, this would be different if we were in a do-while loop, because a do-while loop is always executed at least once. The syntax is a bit different though. You start with the keyword do, then you specify the code block, and you end with your while condition. So let's go for I again and say while I is smaller than 15. Fair enough, it doesn't know I yet, so let's make a new I. You can say I equals 0. Then below here we can again just print I. If I don't do anything now, we'll end up in an infinite loop again. So let me increase I by 1. So here we go. It prints 0 to 14, just like it did the other time. So in this situation, there's no actual difference between a while and a do-while loop. But if I turn 15 into 0 now, you'll see that it prints the 0 at least, it prints the 0 once. And that's opposed to this one here, where it did not print the 0. As soon as the condition was not met, it would not enter the while loop. So here it does it at least once, and then it's going to check the condition. So these are the 4 loops that Java knows. There's the for loop, as we've seen on top, with its 3 parts. The counter that you specify, the condition, and the action after each iteration. Then there is the enhanced for loop that does something for every element in a collection or list. Then we have the while loop that just does something until a certain condition is true. And we have the do while loop that executes code at least once. In my next video, I will tell something about break and continue.